this webinar from the Open Group. Today's event is being brought to us by Biz Design, a member of the Open Group, which has worked very closely with the organisation for a number of years now. Today's presenter is Mark Langhorst from Biz Design. And before I hand over to Mark, I would just like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, with regards to questions, the best way to ask a question that you'd like Mark to answer at the end of his presentation is to use the text QA facility. If you do write a question into the QA facility, can I ask you to address it to all participants? That one gets to see all the questions that are being answered. If you could comment or share a chat with a fellow attendee, then the best way to do that is to use the text chat facility. But if you'd like a question answered by today's presenter, please write that into the QA facility. And we will try and answer as many questions at the end of Mark's presentation. It is also being recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, and I know that sometimes audio can be problematical around the globe, full event recording will be available tomorrow. Everyone who's registered for today's event will receive an email with an appropriate link where they can access that recording. I also know that we have a number of questions every event asking about slides, and I know that Biz Design are very good at making slides available on their website. I'm sure that Mark will provide you with a URL where you can access his presentation on the Biz Design website. So that's enough from me. If you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Yes, I can. And indeed, at the end of my presentation, I will provide you with the URL where you can download the slides from our website. For any reason you can't get them from there, you can just drop me an email, of course. Okay, let's get on with the subject of today. It is about strategy execution using capabilities planning, enterprise architecture, and portfolio management. For those of you who know me, it will be no surprise that we'll be using models, and especially Archimate models as kind of backbone to the story, but it's not really a talk about modeling these subjects in detail, although I'll be showing them. And well, lots of words about my background, where you can reach me. Perhaps most important in the context of this presentation and the context of the Open Group is that I lead the development of the Archimate standard already from before it was an Open Group standard. I'm still heavily involved in that. The talk today will show you some Archimate examples, but it's not really Archimate-centric. Enterprise architecture is, of course, key to the subject of strategy execution, so I will be talking a lot about that. A few words about Biz Design. We've been in existence for 15 years now, founded as a spin-off from a Dutch R&D institute, where we originally developed the Archimate standard, focused on R&D, currently growing quite rapidly globally also through our partners. But more on that you can, of course, find on our website. Our focus is really on helping organizations change themselves. So the change capabilities of organizations are what we help to improve. Given the increasingly high pressure that companies are under, we think this is a very important capability. Our software is geared towards supporting that. Our services are also helping organizations in their capabilities. And strategy execution, the topic of today, is of course key to that. How do you implement the strategy in organization? And that's, I think, a highly important, very difficult subject. The Open Group has done a survey about 10 months ago on difficulties in strategy implementation, strategy formulation, and about 80% of the organizations surveyed, strategy execution is the main issue. Not really strategy definition, that might be difficult, but executing on your strategy. And one of the main problems there is that different parts of the organization have a different view on what the strategy actually is. So everybody is marching in a different direction. So a clear line of sight from strategy to execution to realization. And today we'll show you how a number of different disciplines brought together help bridge these gaps. Capability-based planning, of course, makes your strategy more concrete. And architecture helps you to fill in the details and the design of the enterprise, you could say, provides you with the necessary structure. And portfolio management then helps you decide on your investments, business value, where to put your money. Art mentioned them already, a way of providing you with the backbone of this structure, linking these parts together, and the right tool support for that, because this is something you cannot do on the back of a beer mat. This is quite complicated stuff. Okay, start with the challenge that many organizations face. One driver for change nowadays is the digital enterprise, the huge pressure of technology developments on companies to change their strategy, new business models that get invented every day, new ways of acting has come available, big data as a big theme. Well, you all know these kinds of pressures in your organizations. To really strategic change requires that you have this coherent view of where you're going with your organization. Disciplines are involved in these changes. Often you see that they don't have the same image of the speed of change makes life even more difficult. If you have a complicated change to go through, it also has to be done at speed. That's a very challenging environment. So a way of systematically and reliably implementing these kinds of strategic changes by way of managing on value. It's important to pick those parts of your strategy that add this value in a way and implement along these lines of value. But see that organizations have many different initiatives going on, have assets, say applications, for example, but don't know what the value of these are and don't know how to prioritize them. So how this might be improved. And I'm using two anonymized client cases based on actual client hours, but we cannot disclose the details there. One is a big pharmaceutical, one of the major pharmaceutical companies in the world, and they have the typical issues of these global organizations, geographic dispersion, different parts of the company that actually do the same thing in different ways, of course resulting from a history of mergers and takeovers, and with high ambitions. The other similar story, it's a financial insurance bank. They're in banking and insurance. They're smaller, but they're also the result of many different mergers and takeovers, and need to rationalize their insurance landscape and cursor to separating their banking and insurance businesses. So the background of both stories, and those are both real-life cases, but I've simplified things, and I will just be showing examples from these cases in a slightly smaller than the actual images, because we cannot really use the actual data, and it's of course also not visible on slides then. The need for change in both cases is rather similar. You see the external pressures from competitors, from regulatory authorities, and just internal pressures on a legacy application landscape, cost pressures, heterogeneity in various places. So how do you do strategic transformation on that scale? And that can be really massive. I'll have some illustration later on this little company, and it's really staggering the amount of projects and programs they had running. Strategic planning and get from planning to execution. Monitor the execution, adapt your planning, and all at the same time keep open. They're very challenging, and it requires this collaboration between all kinds of disciplines. And it's not the kind of old-fashioned waterfall process where you define your strategy, throw it over the wall to the next in line, and those will define more details, and then more details come, and then eventually somebody is going to execute something. May seem like that, may have this waterfall feeling, but that's because I have to tell it in a linear way. So I will start with strategy and then to capability-based planning and portfolio management. But it's not my intention to see this as a a linear process where you have this waterfall nature. So collaboration between these disciplines is highly important, and sharing and integrating the information that they have on their part of the transformation is key to making this work. On one of the two case organizations, Archi Pharma, when we arrived when we started our engagement with them, they already had some stuff going on. They had a fairly business capability map. I'll show you some examples from that later on. So they already had started stating their strategy into the capabilities they will need in the future. And they also had a large project and program portfolio, all kinds of change initiatives already running that were hopefully implemented. To give you a feeling for the size of this, the capability map was not that complicated. 12 key capabilities with one level of decomposition, but more than 200 programs at over 5,000 projects running. Thing that we reorganized their complete portfolio of these projects, but we helped them get a grip on this set way of showing them an approach to this. We'll be talking later on how we did that. But the issue that they had was that there was this huge gap between strategy and portfolios. So different projects that were not aligned with the strategy, some deliverables that didn't provide anything that contributed to the strategy, overlapping projects, contradicting projects, even worse. One project was aiming to add some functionality to an application, while another project was slated to completely scrap the application. So decommission it entirely. Well, those projects were, of course, not in line, but came from different parts of the business who didn't know about each other. Maybe that there were parts of the strategy for which no initiatives were defined to make them happen. This maybe more technical desire to rationalize the application landscape because the costs were way too high and a lot of overlap. At the same time, you're in a strategic change is also rather difficult. So the overview, making sure that the different parts together was a main challenge. I have an idea of what we need to fill this gap. Enterprise architecture. That I'm talking to an audience from the Open Group. I expect that there are many architects in the audience. I think you will not be surprised that enterprise architecture is key to this kind of transformation. It just shows you the three elements that you need in any larger change. You need, of course, to want to go. To aim, you need to have a goal. That's where your strategy lives. Utilizing that, that's where the projects and investments are located. So your portfolio management, on your change initiatives, on your investments, on which activities are going to carry out to really make things happen. But you have a way of making sure that all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. Your projects does ensure that the results of these projects are aligned with each other and with the strategy. So that's where hand side comes in. And now design enterprise architecture as the discipline that creates the structure that realizes the strategy. Those three parts really need to work together. And this is not a kind of waterfall process. These three really need to come together in the middle. The architecture will feed into the strategy to, for example, give feedback on feasibility. The project management needs architecture to make sure that the projects fit together. Architecture needs the output from the projects to create the next levels. So it's all related to each other. If the Archimate models and the concepts in Archimate, that this neatly fits with the structure of the Archimate language. For the Archimate, you have the core, or the core, and I've just shown one core element here. Core, that's where the actual description of the functioning enterprise is made. So that's on the left-hand side. Then we have the Archimate motivation extension. That's where it's live for describing where you want to go. Things, requirements, stakeholders, and more of those concepts. So those live at the top of this triangle. implementation and migration extension, and that's where concepts live that take from A to B. Things like work package, plateau, gap, that type of concepts that is important for the realization process. There's a language neatly covers these three parts of strategic transformation, so this is ideally suited to bring together these different elements, and that's also what I will show in some of the examples that are to come. This one, which is, well, the concept in that's not officially Archimate yet. You see capabilities there. I'll be talking about that a little more, but if you hear the picture here, what you see is that on top we have these business goals realized by capabilities, which is a possible future Archimate concept. I would say that everybody talks about the most. So it's, let's say, a very possible future Archimate concept. And then we have the architecture flows that bowl together different stages of the architecture, different parts of the architecture in a coherent whole. And those plateaus are then realized by things like change programs and projects. So layers neatly cover, well, let's go back to that one, neatly cover scope of the transformation. And it's not to say that you first define all your business goals, then all your capabilities, then all your plateaus, and then all your change programs. Of course, in the ongoing enterprise, you will have elements of this, and it's a continuous evolution of this entire landscape. It's not a full process going from top to bottom. If this mature enterprise architecture practice, the most important step is to make your architecture actionable. It's putting it on the wall of a future or current state IT landscape. It's reporting decision making, supporting change by providing management with the right information to make these complicated decisions. Information. Successful enterprise architecture practices, I think what they are successful at, it is not showing nice diagrams to the, say, the IT people that have to implement stuff. It is showing the outputs of the enterprise, the effects of the enterprise architecture to management, to decide on investments, on different scenarios, on strategic choices. And successful enterprise architects have a clear focus on what they need to provide management with in order to implement these changes. So just the diagram that somebody else has to implement, it's really about creating the dashboards and the analyses that management needs to decide on change. As a discipline is really useful because it brings together information from all kinds of angles. It can be connected to the strategy, it can be connected to capability-based planning, to your portfolio management. We'll show examples of that later on. Of course, as a relation with your development, but also the operational world of service management, the IT people, things like governance, risk, and compliance. Your compliance officer might be very interested in what's in the enterprise architecture to see you're compliant with rules and regulations. So it really functions as a knowledge hub in this wheel of different disciplines. And enterprise architects, in that sense, are people that are in a spot in the organization that's rather unique. View of all kinds of aspects of the enterprise that most people don't see. Their own discipline in their own silo, but as architect and the enterprise architecture as a product bring information from all these different angles, and that's very, very useful in this complicated issue of strategic transformation, where you really need to make sure that everything is coherent. So architecture is a crucial discipline in change. Right. So the outline of the story, and now I will take you through some of the steps to take in this change. So we'll start with strategy, and strategy, of course, starts with who are your stakeholders and what are their drivers. So one of the first things you need to know is where the decisions on, for example, the investments take place, what the interests of different stakeholders are, and how these influence each other. I often see that it's difficult in implementing strategic changes that there are, for example, different line of business managers, different interests, want to have different things from, say, the architects, based on their own needs, which might always be aligned with the overall strategy of the company. So, make investment decisions based on the overview of the entire organization, instead of looking at just certain business lines or certain parts of the organization, the important issues, but very politically sensitive in many organizations. Good idea of who your stakeholders are and how they influence each other is important in implementing strategy. I've put up completely different pictures. I see a small Archimate model showing two stakeholders and a number of drivers. CIO has the technology as a driver. He wants to state-of-the-art technology in the organization, so the important driver. And of course, business value versus cost in the IT landscape is also very important. Likewise, senior business executives will have their drivers, and many more will have those. Another kind of picture this is called a power grid. It shows the position of different stakeholders, and it's sort of an enhanced power grid. This is something we created in our own software, Design Architect, and this is a picture that shows you the position of the stakeholders in terms of power and interest with respect to a certain goal. And this rationalization of the IT landscape is what their attitude is towards that goal. The happy CIO on top is positive towards that goal. The back office employee is neutral, but they're of the back office and the application manager are negative. Well, you can see that they will feel the impact of rationalizing the IT landscape. And that they also influence each other. So that's important information, and it's all put in one simple picture with a very nice overview, which you as an architect might usually employ to know about this force field of stakeholders. I will show this picture to the stakeholders themselves, by the way. That can be rather dangerous because, of course, this is an idea of your opinion on their position. So this might be a little tricky. It's difficult to know this because if the CIO has to decide on something and the director of the back office is a strong influence on that, well, you need to know that to feel with the right information. For example, you might need to influence the director before going to the CIO. Otherwise, your decision might, the decision might go into the wrong direction. Another way of describing strategy is with the business model canvas. It's a way of depicting your business model as an organization. It's highly popular, and what you see over here is a small picture tool which shows you how this looks. So you have things like your key activities and your value propositions and your resources and your segments and your channels, etc. And different aspects of your business model in there. Well, it seems rather informal. These elements can quite onto elements of your architecture. Take, for example, your activities or your resources or your partners. They're present in the enterprise architecture as well. So this can be linked directly to elements in architecture models in Archimate. A picture in with Archimate symbols in these boxes because, well, you will use that with management. But this is the type of picture management understands. But underneath this, there is a direct link to the Archimate and architecture models. So tying things together. Like stakeholders in the previous picture were actual Archimate. Here, the business model is also something that you can link to the enterprise architecture as well. Then an important aspect of strategy is your operating model. Some of you are familiar with the book Enterprise Architecture as Strategy, which I've listed at the bottom. It's a very good book on the strategic focus of enterprise architecture on the integration and standardization of your business processes across the enterprise. see the four different typical operating models that you get. For example, if you take McDonald's, they are in the replication space. They have their ways of flipping burgers across the globe. So the processes are standardized, but they do not integrate customer data across the globe between the different subsidiaries. That would not be useful. McDonald's in the Netherlands can do nothing with customer data from the UK. So that's application. And for all the others, you can follow examples. Now, it's described as a way of standardizing and integrating business processes. But the idea might also apply to the implementation of capabilities in a more general sense. Do you want to have a standardized implementation of a certain capability across the globe, or have individual parts of your organization have their own implementations of these capabilities? Do these capabilities need to be integrated, closely linked together, share data or not? So these decisions are very important in planning the implementation of your capabilities. Well, you can model strategy in quite a high level of detail. Well, this is of course nearly unreadable. So if we zoom in on this, we see a more detailed picture. And here you see one important goal, one part of the strategy of our Archie Pharma example. They want to centralize their information systems, improve information sharing, facilitate resource sharing, and eliminate local variance. So you see, this looks really like the education operating model from the previous slide. This used across the globe, one information systems landscape, no variance. That's the ideal. Simplified, the real picture was a little more complicated, but you get the idea. And from these goals and sub-goals, you can then derive more concrete requirements. And these requirements have to be implemented, have to be realized by stability. That's the overall picture. You also see the numbers with the relationships on top. In what we have created an analysis method, I'm going to detail, but we have put weight on these relationships so that you, if you want to, can show how important a certain goal is for a certain higher level goal. So you can give weight to these relationships, and then you can do some computation to see what contribution, for example, a part architecture provides to the higher level goals. For advanced stuff, for now, let's leave it at that. Okay, modeling of your strategy. Capability-based planning. I've used the capability word already quite a number of times. Seen some capability symbols, but let's be clear about what a capability is. It's not what organization has a capability, is what you can do given the resources you possess. So a capability is different from a business process. A business process is really what you do on a day-to-day basis. A capability is much more about what your abilities are. So abstraction, it's much more related to strategy, to planning, to where you want to go with your organization. And it expresses things independent of the actual organization. So it's not about organization structure. It's not about responsibilities of certain, say, managers. It's really what your abilities are. In planning, abilities are used to get insight in different aspects of the enterprise, because capabilities are often measured in terms of certain dimensions, and later on. And that all helps you in planning the investments and resources to capabilities to the right levels. In full, and for investment decisions. Because if a capability needs to be improved and what that would take, then that's good input for your portfolio management. And it helps you in planning and managing your programs and projects, because capabilities as a notion in your architecture, in your business architecture, can also very good point from where you start defining your programs and projects, because they are a coherent whole, able to have your programs defined at the level of these capabilities, so that they have their contribution is concrete and clear, is linked to these specific capabilities. So here, capability map. Well, this is from the Archie Pharma example. Again, unreadable, so I will zoom in a bit. what we see is the product management capability, which for a pharmaceutical is very important. Then is really their lifeline to the future. So things like R&D and product development, your portfolio management, so having the right set of products in different phases of development, for example. Things like outsourcing your R&D, external R&D, product safety, of course. So the example of sort of the capability map of pharma. That what you typically see is that these capabilities are evaluated and planned according to different dimensions. 6 dimensions that might be relevant. There are different ways of doing this. There are no official standard set of dimensions, but these are pretty common. You have the people, the people that do actual work or work. You have these they follow. You have the products that are delivered by the capability. You have technology or other structural resources used. You have the external dimension, its relationships with the environment, and you have the used. This is the set of dimensions you always have to use. You might do with some others, but this is a useful set. And what we see here is also the planning of this product management capability. We see that in the first quarter of 2015, they're in the blue space. Especially the product dimension needs to be improved. So the output of that capability, that's the issue there. So the first target phase, the red one, is where you see the improvements. And of course, in any typical web planning diagram, you will focus your attention on those where the gap is the biggest. So that's where most investments will be targeted. So again, it's a picture that helps you decide on investments because it clarifies where the biggest issues are. These metrics, used on different axes, we can define those in various ways, and often these are complicated metrics. For example, the process dimension here, a composite metric consisting of things like the process adaptability, the process maturity, performance is variance, because well, you don't want variance, you want the end of the process always to be the same for the output. These things you can measure. You put that into your architecture as data attached to the elements in the architecture, in this case to this capability, and that to provide an overview of different aspects of different capabilities. For just one capability, of course, you can do this for many more capabilities, and then you can decide on where the big issues are and where the investments should go. Important input for the next is for the enterprise management. Enterprise portfolio management. For this, you see the main type of portfolio management that are product portfolio management and application portfolio management. Those are the most common kinds. But in anything you invest in as a portfolio, I think maybe even it should be managed as a portfolio. So that's why we talk about enterprise portfolio management, because we apply portfolio management to all investment decisions. Behind portfolio management is that you group things and make decisions at a higher level on these investments, not at the level of individual projects, for example. Take again, they have 1,000 different projects. They have to decide on the investments in these individual projects on a project-by-project basis. Well, good. That won't work well, and if I had to do that, I would probably turn mad. It's not possible to have an overview anymore. Like that, which is that projects that are submitted first or have backers that have a loud voice are selected instead of really balanced allocation of your investments. If you do subdivide the things you want to invest in groups that their own upfront part of the budget, this allocation is much more balanced, and you can focus much more on the business value that these individual elements right, rather than on the individual cost of individual projects and the budget that is still left, for example. One very common example is that you see that many organizations have or are investing nearly all their IT budget in keeping the legacy landscape running. They think, well, this is the most important part. We always have to keep the lights on, and the innovative projects never have a backer that's strong enough. So it's always the IT manager sharing the rest of the company with the needs of the legacy landscape. Your investments across the different categories that you might have, say, well, keep the lights on, innovate, and maybe a third category could be competitive advantage in a certain area. If you find the subdivisions up front and you say, well, 70% of my budget is going to the existing application landscape, 10% is going to really innovative stuff, and 20% we use to compete, to be the first in a certain market. Only after that, you set that budget across the different projects or the different assets in these portfolios. You make sure they're not eating up all your budget just to light on. It helps you on the one hand create a more balanced allocation of your investments, and on the other hand, it's very helpful to get these large numbers organized to group things. The common use cases we see for this, well, I've already mentioned some of these. Of course, application portfolio management, especially in rationalizing application landscapes, like in our two examples here, companies after a merger which have a lot of overlap. The more long-range capability planning, and also the RT Pharma use case, where they do it at the same time, so you have both use cases there. The third one is more tracking and optimizing what's actually happening in all these change initiatives, and bringing that back into your architecture and looking at the actual contribution of the outcomes of these projects and programs, how that relates to your strategy. So do the results actually contribute? So that's the feedback loop, basically. These three use cases are, of course, very common for enterprise portfolio management, but you can manage investing in portfolios. A fourth one might be, for example, manage your products in these terms, where you have your cash cows and your dogs and your stars. Well, some of you might know that. Something is very broadly applicable. Nice complement to enterprise architecture, because enterprise architecture ensures coherence between changes, ensures a coherent where you are and where you want to go. Portfolio management then helps in making the right decisions based on business value of where your money. Disciplines that are very useful to get a close link between. In practice, that's not always the case. Many organizations where IT is located close to or in the IT organization, and management, and especially project portfolio management, is more on the business side of the organization. Advocate that these two groups at least have a very good communication link, because they really need each other. For IT portfolio management, application portfolio management is often closer to the architecture groups, but your program portfolio it also has a lot of relationships with the enterprise architecture. Even see them. So my would be to really be sure that these people talk to each other, create this coherent and informed decision-making, prioritization, and planning. Then look at what you need for portfolio management. This is our house of portfolio management. You might see many houses like this, and what we see here is that we have, on top, of course, the business outcomes where it all focuses on. We see on the left strategy feeding into the portfolio management and business decisions coming out of that. If we don't need portfolio management, we see the objectives derived from the strategy. We see the portfolio design itself. So what portfolios, how I measure them, what are the metrics that I'm going to apply, what are to show the outcomes, the data that feeds into that, can come from all kinds of different sources. Can come from your financial systems, can come from user surveys. Well, you can imagine the different kinds of sources you might have. You would all that into the metrics you apply to your portfolios. The dashboards, you can make analyses and recommendations to management for these. So I see, say, a ranking of my applications based on the business risk that I run if one of them fails. That can help managers decide on investing in an application that's technically not very good, but a high business risk. These enterprise architecture models, like I talked about before, and the basis of this whole house is, of course, your capability of portfolio management, where you need the process and the people and the skills and the tools, a solid capability to carry out portfolio management. Elements, I've already shown you some of that, and I'll zoom in a little more. First of all, we need to have a good portfolio management process. And typically, that consists of two phases. First, you design your portfolios. So, basically, you define what should be in the portfolios and how we should measure things, evaluation criteria. And then the execution phase, which is often executed more often. You might design this, say, once a year, but you execute continuously. You populate your portfolio, so you put in the portfolio, for example, the different kind of projects or applications. You score them, put data, evaluate them along the metrics you have defined, and you assess the outcomes using these dashboards to make recommendations to decision makers to help them decide what to do. And of course, the continuous process, this runs much more often. This is what the portfolio managers typically do as a day job, whereas the management of your portfolios is something that's, maybe strategy changes. Here's about grouping things in portfolios. There are many more ways of doing that, but some examples you often see: the strategic objectives of the organization, the capabilities that are supported. Well, the product life cycles are already mentioned. Pacing is an interesting one. For your portfolio, Gartner's structure of systems of differentiation and systems of innovation. So that's an example. And you can create your landscape of different portfolios, and you get things like this. This is again from our tool, and to zoom on that a little. Here we want such application, such a portfolio. In this case, the strategic applications. Typically, one description, an owner, all associated to that portfolio, population, the stuff that's in there, the method used to evaluate the elements of the portfolio, and the board, so the pictures you want to use to outcomes of the metrics, the different outputs. That's typically how you would describe each portfolio. One important thing that you might notice if you look at the portfolios I've put on this slide is that it's necessarily the case that something can only be in one portfolio. Go back, you see that I've got the back office and front office portfolio, but I also have a strategic portfolio. So applications might be strategic in the back office. This gives you different ways of switching through the things you want to manage. So you can have different views on the same parts of your landscape from perspectives. And you can have portfolios of portfolios. The one on the right-hand side has that. And that's, for example, the Archipharma case with their programs and 5,000 projects. They will have multiple layers of portfolios, of course. Otherwise, it is still manageable. So then, my next vision is, how am I going to put a value on the elements in them? Is a simple one and the one everybody uses. What are my investments going to be? How much is it going to cost? That's maybe the least complicated. There are good models for that. It's something you know. The business value is often a lot more difficult. You look at the future. So the benefits are, of course, more difficult to decide. If it were just financial benefits, it would still be fairly straightforward. But many organizations also look at other kinds of benefits. For example, in public sector organizations, you're looking at societal benefits. Well, a lot more difficult to measure than simply the money, the revenues you might get out of some initiative. Other examples that you might want to consider, the architectural fit. So if you decide on a project, one of the things you want to decide on is, does it fit within my architecture? If not, maybe I should rank it a little lower. Or the risk that the project fails, well, if that risk is high, I don't want to put it high on my priority list. I want to say, well, let's not invest too much in that. Think strategic importance. Is a certain initiative opening up new roads into the future? Also an important criterion. Not easy to put monetary value on. More specifically, looking at your application landscape, you often see business value and technical value. For you familiar with application lifecycle management, these are highly recognizable. You evaluate your applications based on the hand on how they support the business, and on the other hand on the technical quality. And these might also be derived from the architecture itself. If your architecture, which comprises your products and your business processes and the applications that support these, one of the ways is to look at the business value is to trace these relationships and see if a certain application supports important business process that provides a product that delivers an important value to the customer that serves an important business goal. So see across the architecture, and also decide on business value, technical value, or some aspects of that. Many of these technical aspects are often measured in practice, like the customer survey, measuring the downtime of applications, looking at the technology it's in, maybe it's old-fashioned legacy technology, etc. Often they come from the outside that you link to your architecture, link to your role, enrich it with extra data that help you create dashboards. Well, an example of such a metric, again broken down in different sub-metrics, is business fit, which in this case consists of something like business criticality, existing operations that run on top of that application. That's in this case, if you look at scoring, that's an automated way of scoring because it traces through the architecture which operations run on top of a certain application. Business alignment, business risk, strategic relevance. These kinds of metrics could be input for that. And this is just an example. Of course, you can define all kinds of other metrics. A set of predefined metrics that help you your own landscape. Of course, you can define your own metrics and tailor them to specific business needs you have. Not that easy to do this practice because the data has to come from somewhere. But to have good decisions, you need to have good data. The question is, of course, where to get the data. It's from various sources within your organization, so you have to go to all kinds of people from all kinds of disciplines. You have to maybe link to all kinds of different systems. Well, that's some of the things we often do as well. Link it to your financial system, import spreadsheets, that kind of stuff to get the data. And then, of course, the next question is how good is the data? So quality of the data. That's the second issue. So if you have the data, is it good enough? Finally, if you want to involve all these people, might not always be too willing to give you the data because what's in for them is power, and they also expose that they didn't do too good a job, that their data is not good enough, and that might be very difficult to get it from them. So that's not just a technical issue, but very much a social and cultural issue in the organization. Be sure that people cooperate. See what's in it for them, see what's in it for the entire organization. Into the architecture, to your nice architecture repository, link that to the applicable elements in the architecture. You can use that to create all kinds of different views on the architecture that provide input for the decision makers. And that's not just complex architecture diagrams, but typically all kinds of management-oriented dashboards or Cs or heat maps, which are more insightful for management than a complicated architecture diagram. It's nice boards that show you different aspects of these portfolios and give a good overview that help you make your decisions. This, of course, already mentioned your application lifecycle management. It shows you the typical technical value and business value picture where you have the bubbles for different applications, and the size of the bubble in this case says something about the cost of the application, the says something about the risk, and then we have these four quadrants: tolerate, invest, migrate, and eliminate, which then from the acronym TIME, which is on top there. And you have these different quadrants determine the advice of what to do with an application. So number 4 in this case, its business value is not too high, but technically it's okay, so we tolerate it. Maybe we want to add some functionality so that the business can do more with it. Luckily, there's nothing in the eliminate quadrant, but if something there, well, that's where the business should focus its attention in many cases, because then the painful decisions are going to happen. If I color scheme in my landscape, I get like this. And this is from our second example, Ark Insurance Bank, an actual anonymized picture. So if you look closely at what's in the boxes, you can't read it because it's scrambled. Virtual application landscape, where the app is organized according to business function or capability, if you want. And if I look at the bottom left-hand business function, I see all of the applications that support it are colored red and should be eliminated. So this really has a problem. So if the IT manager, that would be one of the things really focus my attention on, because how can we support our function in the future if all its applications are dated or bad and need to be eliminated? So this is a different way of depicting the same information. Heat maps are basically created with one push of the button, showing you information from your application lifecycle on your entire landscape. Good for your prioritization and planning and road mapping and resource planning, and that helps you to get from A to B. Well, then you get into planning the transformation of your enterprise. So now where you are, you know where you want to go, where the important decisions have to be made. Then it's a matter of planning. And so in the let's say run-of-the-mill architecture work, gap analysis, in this case, an example from Archie Pharma again. If I color it according to the current and future state, we see 3 different billing processes and systems in the current state, and in the future state, it's all integrated, one process, one solution, one application that supports that. This is a simplified picture, but you get the idea here. Again, analysis, architecture work, defining how to get from A to B, define different work packages, the projects, the programs that need to be executed. And you can, of course, see where this. So these are again related to the elements of the architecture, which are again to the business goals you want to serve. So what you need to do, then of course you need to plan this in a staged way to make this manageable, and then you get into ultimate plateaus. You plan too far into the future. We're not into the old communist 5-year plans. That's not something that's going to work. But at least you want to have some measured set of stages that stable solutions, stable intermediate stages from can move to the next one. Picture again is from our Ark Insurance example, an actual picture again from their organization. And here we see the different plateaus in their evolution. Because these applications are now based on the original parties in the merger with this company. So we see several different colors from the several different parties that merged together. The little pink are the projects that basically move the data from one application to another. Here is a landscape of applications for retirement funds, and move the data from one to another, and one to end up finally in a single application that was developed from 2012 onwards. I think the full stage is a little different now. They're aiming for 2 applications, but you get the idea. The plateaus that give coherent, staged way of changing from A to B. This landscape, this is even more than what we saw in the previous picture. We see the overview of the entire application landscape, again, called according to the originating companies. And see this transforms. This is the target landscape that they are focusing on. This is the 2016 landscape. And the sixth plateau picture I showed before, that's the picture for one of these business functions, the one on top with the single application in it. There you can see where this is going. Again, different ways of depicting the same information to get A to B, and shows you the evolution of the landscape, and you can calculate cost reduction and other measures accordingly. My final few slides, a peek into the future. If you put this all together, you kind of strategy on a page picture. So it shows you many aspects of this. Most of it is text, not complicated pictures, but we see a capability heat map, and we see some of these dashboard below. If I, for example, click on my product leadership strategy, it lights up parts of my overall page are related to that. So an assessment of the current situation, objective to address that assessment. It needs to realize these objectives, the outcomes they have to provide, the difference that I'm going to do, the activities that are impacted. Another one, say the harmonized billing process project, I see which objectives it addresses, which part of strategy it's related to, the outcome should provide. Of course, if I click on my vision, hopefully everything lights up, or at least the things that I'm going to work on. Well, some capabilities don't light up because they are not impacted by my strategy, but everything else that I do is indeed related to my vision. I would have a problem. But you get the idea. This is something we are looking for, something that might be part of the future for our product. It's not there yet, but it gives you an idea of what we want to have in the future. Basically, my beginning, execution is very difficult, but you can really make this work by linking capability-based planning, enterprise architecture, management through these Archimate models and supported by the right tools. I hope that useful links. If you download the presentation, you can find more background information. But I will close with a slide where you can find the presentation. That's the URL at the bottom, and where you find me, so my contact details. That concludes my presentation. Then I think we should switch to questions.
Thank you very, very much for that. Yes, we've had a number of questions about the slides, so there's a link to where you can get the slides, and they always are available on the Biz Design website.
Yes.
We are getting close to the end of the time, but let's just go through a few questions while we have a couple of minutes left then, Mark. Okay. First of all, we have a question here from Colin. He asks, how do Biz Design support communication between EA and project office teams?
Well, I think it's, for a large part, it's not a question of, let's say, tool support for that communication. I think the most important issue is that you have to get the people together. It's a cultural issue. And you can, of course, support that with different kinds of outputs, depending on what projects, say, your PMO or other people are used to. But I think it's much more about making sure that these people get to know each other, often talk about what you're doing, and indeed you can use, say, overviews of projects and programs, the relationship of programs to parts of the architecture. Analysis that's useful is just have, say, you have an overview of your application landscape and the applications with projects that work on them. I recently did the clients, and it's hanging on their wall now, and they can now see which projects work on which applications. And for example, if an applicant has multiple colors, then apparently there's more than one project working on them. So these projects need to be aware of that and need to align their work to avoid stepping each other's toes. That's just, but I think it's much more an issue of getting the people to talk than that tools are that difficult. That's not very complicated. You can do all kinds of nice stuff there.
From Robert asking, have you any insight into how workable benefits realization are? He says they seem always to be easily talked down due to economic conditions, etc.
Down, you mean? Well, I'm sorry, my project didn't deliver on its promises, but it was not my fault. Is that what talk down is?
I think saying in a business environment, workable benefits can often be the value can be undermined because of economic conditions.
Of course, well, you can't control the economy, and I don't have a solution for that. But I think it's important that you define your business benefits in a clear and in a measurable way. Otherwise, indeed, you can talk down things because it's too, let's say, too soft. But it is a difficult issue, and benefits are much more difficult to define often than costs. What's very important, and I think that's something this approach also helps with, is that often see that different projects try to claim the same benefits. You should really avoid this overlap, but that's something that I see often happening, that an increase in revenue is for everybody who has basically turned one screw on the machine, and that's of course not real. So you have to make sure that the benefits that are claimed that is no more than the overall benefits that are actually gained. And this approach helps you see where the benefits are claimed and whether that's, if you add it up, if it's more than the total benefits that are realized.
So here from Tracy, she's asking you, will you speak to a basic sequence of data gathering? Our level of EA maturity is low, but we want to start gathering this information in a useful way. She's asking, where to start that process.
The first step is, of course, doing a kind of inventory of what you have available, and that means starting with talking to different people from these different disciplines where you think you might find useful data. The first step you have to take, go around the organization, asking who have these kinds of data available, and then you get to the level of, well, where is it? How good is it? Is it in some kind of system, or is it maybe just on paper? How to get it into your tools? But it always starts with getting the overview of where you might find the data, and then asking around, basically. It's not maybe sort of the simple one-click approach, because it really requires you to go around the organization, talk to people who know where it is. Often there's no other way of discovering where the data resides.
Just do one last question. This is from Joy, and I think it's similar to the question you've just addressed. But let's see. So Joy asks, with regards to data collection, I'd be interested in suggestions on how to circumvent situations where data is bad and the data owners are understandably not cooperative.
I don't have an easy solution for that. If the data is bad, there's no other source for better data. The only thing you might do, if it's important decisions are to be based on that data, is go to the management that needs to make these decisions, explain them, well, we can't edit the data and anyway it's bad. Put some pressure on people to come up with better data. Improve their processes, improve their, whatever it needs to improve to get better data. But I have no easy solutions here. And I've seen this in several cases, and often what you experience is that people are reluctant to give you the data, and you ask them again, and they say, well, next week or next month, and then you ask them again, and they will give you the real story until it's way too late. So that's a symptom you might recognize that there is something problematic there. Cases indeed that they don't have the data or it's not good enough and they don't want it to give you for that reason. But I don't see many ways other than going over their heads to their managers, and that's not the sympathetic way, and they might not be willing to cooperate. So help them understand why it's important, help them get the data better. That might be one angle, and the other, well, go to their management. But that would be my last resort. So help them get their data better, show them why they then can contribute in a more meaningful way to the decision-making process, how they can become more valuable with their solution. So circumventing the situation, I don't think there's any circumventing here.
Well, that's some really good advice. Well, we now have overrun a bit now, so I think this would be a good time to just end our presentation. Mark, do you have any final comments you'd like to make before I end today's event?
So if anybody has a specific question, just drop me an email. I'll respond to that in the next days, and then that's if I couldn't get to your questions, we'll do it like that.
Okay, Mark. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And we hope you'll join us again in future webinars from the Open Group. Many thanks.
Thank you.